Welcome back to the Launch with Confidence podcast. Today's guest is Ciara Peter. She's the SVP of Product at Robin. Over the past decade, she's led product teams at some of the most influential SaaS companies, from transforming Gainsight PX through triple-digit growth to shaping Medallia's employee experience platform, and helping redefine workplace software with Robin. At Robin, Ciara has helped steer the company through massive shifts in how we work, from the chaos of COVID to the rise of hybrid and return to the office. Competing with giants like Microsoft and Zoom, while positioning Robin as a comprehensive platform. In this conversation, she shares how to guide teams through change, ways to rebuild confidence in a new direction, and how to stay ahead when the market just won't stop moving. Let's get into it. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Launch with Confidence podcast. Today I'm joined by Ciara Peter. Ciara, thank you for joining me.
Thanks so much, Chris, for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this conversation. We talked last week, or not last week, it was actually a couple weeks ago. But you mentioned something that was just so profound to me. I really want to be able to have you tell this story to our audience. So I'm going to start off with our first question, if that's cool. How do you help a team that found success in something that you consider like an old story? How do you help them rebuild confidence in something that is a new story, a new direction?
Yeah, great question. So I head up product at a company called Robin, and Robin has been around for about 10 years. So Robin found success. It was when you started seeing room displays at work, and it made it much easier to kind of show that a room was booked or not. Robin was the leader there. As you can imagine, though, other companies saw the opportunity to build in this space. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that probably 100 companies built desk and room booking software. Some of them were upstarts kind of attempting to do something similar to what we did. Some of them were facilities companies that had, space planning tools, but wanted to get in the hybrid space. And some were big companies, like I'll just say them, like Microsoft and Zoom, that, built very low priced products that undercut us significantly. And so we had to make a lot of decisions, a lot of pivots during that time. And so what we knew that we shouldn't do is compete on price because the others were building these kind of lower cost solutions. And we also knew that sort of continuing to build when we already had the best solution, sort of continuing to build a better wheel wasn't necessarily going to help us through this competitive time. And so we did a lot of research, and what we found was there were some other things were happening. The person that was previously managing a workplace, they had a simple job, but now the job had emerged to a combination of IT, facility management, even bordering on HR, employee happiness, and then basic office management. Those people were really underserved. And also I mentioned these different kind of point solutions, entry points. We decided to build a platform. So going from these one or two products like space and desk management to 5 or 6 products to sell together. In theory, you'd think great, because now we can serve the needs of these markets. We're not competing with behemoths that are offering the lower price version of what we have. But, it's a rocky road when you do something, when you make changes like that. And so I'm here to talk about the good, bad, and the ugly. I promise I'll answer your question, but I think the framing is important because I'm going to give specific examples that I want to make sure make sense. So when we started to build towards this new strategy, I think one thing that's really important is extreme transparency. So you have to let people know what your decision-making criteria are. I think you can talk about sort of the external factors at play. There's also economic factors like companies downsizing their real estate, like people wanting to consolidate tools. So it's important to talk about those, but I think you can't depend too much on those external factors. External factors are there, and we talked about those a lot. I think that if I could change anything, it would be a little bit more proactive about here's our position and what we're doing about it and why we think that we can do this even better than the rest of the market. So the decision-making criteria, but even when there are external factors, decision-making criteria is going to come from what are you hearing right now from your sales and customer teams? You're going to look at market trends. I think looking at competitors and what they're doing is important, but you don't want to copy them. And then there's just reading between the lines. People ask me as a product leader, like, what frameworks do you use to make decisions? And I think frameworks are important. They're especially important for people who are starting in their career. But if the big nuggets that I find is when I look at data in 20 different ways until some unique pattern emerges. And so in this case, the pattern, there were some interesting patterns that emerged. I actually watched about 40 sales calls. Yeah.
That's a hefty amount of sales.
I did.
In what period? Or like in a week or?
In about let's say a week or two, because I wanted to see what people were actually saying. Like if what they wanted aligned with how we're positioning our product. And what actually emerged is that the way that we were positioning this platform wasn't quite correct. So I had mentioned that there's sort of like the point solution we were good at. There's kind of, and then there's kind of like long-term planning is what these facilities companies were doing. So we're saying, let's build out the planning as part of this. And actually what we realized is that daily management of an office is a bigger deal than we had thought. And so that's why I talked about this person that now has 4 roles. I would have never found that if I hadn't actually watched the calls. So I don't recommend watching every sales call that ever happens at your company. But when you're going through a change like this, it is hard for you to have validity when you talk about where the market's going if you can't get the nuances of what people are actually saying. And I think AI can do some of this, but what AI will deliver is AI will deliver, you can build the best prompt, but it will still deliver here's the top 10 things that people are talking about. But there are just certain things that you can't find unless you listen to humans talking about it.
Yeah, I mean that active approach seems so much better than I always hear about this in, I guess, don't do this is the feature factory approach for SaaS companies, right? Where they have this huge backlog and they're just going to work on that backlog over the next, year. They're just going to push this out. And when you're not seeing your say business metrics, like your revenue or your sales numbers going up in association with introducing those features, you have to think, okay, well, are these not the features that matter? And I think what you're kind of outlining is this active approach that you have to be listening, not just to your customers or your prospects on sales calls, but your customers. And when you have something like a COVID hit, it changes the way companies do business. And it kind of hit me right when you said it just in that conversation is business was different. So the product that was there before wouldn't have survived the situation that was going on. So it needed to pivot. And then we get back in the office and we got to repivot. And I just love that you as a product leader, right? I think that's what you're saying is having to be involved and not focusing on what you think is just your backlog of things you need. It's not tasks that you need to get done. It's remaining active in your product development process.
Yeah. I think when you have these multifaceted changes, so you have this global pandemic that thankfully most of us are not thinking about all the time anymore. But when you have that, when you have major economic shifts and within the company, you have product shifts. To me, I know that this is going to be a probably multi-year process. And I'm thinking about it at the multi-year scale. A salesperson and a CSM who have monetary, they got to pay their bills based on what we have today, they're not going to resonate as much with a company story. And to be honest, I think it's fair when they'd say, well, of course, as an exec, you have more incentive to think about this longer term, but people have to put food on the table. And so I think the multi-year story is good to convey every once in a while, but what's really important is you have to tie this plan to problems that are being faced today. Even if there's not an obvious direct relationship, even if the reason you're building something is not obviously directly related, you still have to give your people a story that will enhance what they have. So I'll give you an example. One of the elements that we built into our platform is something called workplace services, which is something that helps companies who have like a lot of customers, prospects, external people that they need to impress coming into their office. It helps with like catering, AV, IT setup. On its own, it looks like, I mean, we built it for that use case. That's what people were asking for. But I had to tie it back to the core product. So the most important message is this enhances our space reservation offering. This is not just about sort of helping with these professional services use cases. Like you can say that we have the best space management product because of these things that we're building. Even if not all of their customers were interested in it, I think finding a way to help build confidence in the core product that they're already talking about is important. Because in this case, 90% of our revenue was still tied to these old use cases, even though we knew that we had to go skate to where the puck was going. So bridging that gap is pretty important. If people are loud and clear about current customers having issues with the existing product and you're not solving them, even if it's the right thing for the company, you're going to lose their confidence really fast and you're not going to succeed as a leader. So I think that like gap bridging is very important.
Yeah. So you mentioned listening to sales calls. So you get a handful of sales calls. What other like methods, what other ways are you using to kind of collect that information or to listen to what's going on in the market?
Mm-hmm. So there's listening to calls. There is analyzing NPS. And interestingly, looking at NPS, we actually have two different NPS platforms that we use. One of them is in-app, one of them emails after, and they give you different results. So I think about what's the right time to reach out to people, what's going to be the most relevant. Actually, we've chosen to use one for admins that is after the fact because they're really more of a buyer and their reflecting on the product experience is more important. Whereas we ask end users while they're using the app because them being able to easily get their task done is important. But NPS is another approach. Looking what people are actually doing inside of your app. I love following up on NPS. Like when someone gives a negative result, I can go and see what they were doing right before they gave that negative feedback. But then externally, always keeping a competitive matrix up to date, subscribing to every single competitor, looking at what thought leaders are saying. Like there's always skepticism about thought leaders, and especially LinkedIn is kind of a dumpster fire right now. But I do listen to analysts. Like I think that the top couple of analysts, like I ignored them for probably the first 10 or 15 years, let's say 10 years of my career. Like I didn't really pay attention, but analysts usually do have pretty good insight into where the market's going. Even if it doesn't work, it is what they do know what your competitors are going to do. And there's a lot to come from there. But actually, you know what? Like I just gave a strategy presentation today and I'll give you some kind of alternate type of information that I looked at. I looked at search results over time. So looking at our entire portfolio and where we want to invest more, I looked up 7 different search terms to see how they were trending. That was really interesting. I looked at 20 different features and if a company was using those features, how they retained over time, which helped to strengthen my story and also find some pretty interesting nuggets in there. So yeah, and then obviously like daily product usage.
Yeah. Do you have anything like an advisory board or like a group of like early adopters? Like we work with a lot of people that have beta programs. Do you have that like community of like just always like you have like a group of users that maybe not, I guess in your sense, the admins and your end users that are getting access to maybe early versions of the product?
We do have a group we typically work with admins. End users, it's always sensitive in a B2B environment, getting those end users. And I don't want my end users to care about Office software. I want them to never think about Robin. I want them to not know we exist. My goal is to remove the work for them to like get the resources they need at the office entirely. So I don't want them actually thinking about us. The admins, however, yeah, we do get a cross-functional group because we have the facilities people, the IT people, the, HR people. We get them all in a room to build empathy. I think with these customer advisory boards, you got to have a lot of room for them to have the floor. I think the most important thing is to learn from them. So having some, putting some structure into that conversation, giving them like pre-reads, things to think about in advance, but then they can sort of build empathy among one another. But yeah, that's something that we do twice a year.
Okay. Yeah, you get like some annual meetups and get them together. Do you do it in person? Is it
We do it in person. I think that anytime you can do it in person, you're going to get better results because people get more comfortable when it's really those, like the most impactful time is like the morning break when everybody can chat over a coffee, or like going to lunch, or we went to it was a F1 racing like simulator place for dinner. And and everybody was competing against each other, and they totally built camaraderie. Everyone was like talking smack to each other. And we had our day 2, and then everybody was friends by then. So they could really say what was on their mind.
Such a good strategy is just being able to connect with your customer, your user base. And because that's like when in a couple months after that event, like they're more willing to, participate and give you feedback and be engaged as a customer. That relationship is so important.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to you talked about doing some competitive analysis and keeping like the feelers out. So I'd love to go to the next question that I have, which is as your company's going through a pivot or repositioning, how are you reintroducing the idea of competitors? Because what was once maybe a competitor, you may have some new competition. So how do you go about reintroducing or reframing your positioning after that pivot?
Yeah. The competitors, I think, will usually introduce themselves, and the new competitors that emerge often drive the strategy. So a lot of time we'll see a new competitor coming on the board that we didn't expect, and then that will give us an understanding why. So actually, the data sort of backs it. Like I've never been in a position where I've said, we're introducing this new product and we're going to go after this new competitor out of nowhere. So in my experience, the market usually drives like, that's interesting that this new company is coming up in our competitive deals. We had no idea. So I think that will usually be proactive. So I'd say always pay attention to when a new competitor starts showing up, why they're there. It's usually not an accident.
Yeah, it's interesting. Being in SaaS myself, the vibe coding era of people getting the ability to build fast and produce things. We know they don't have necessarily the enterprise grade on the back end and quality checks and all of that fun stuff, but I feel like that's maybe a direction of competition where people are introducing themselves to market much faster. I think it might be easy to just kind of bump them out because they aren't well tested, or we don't think that they're going to stand the test of time. But what do you think about competitors coming in the world of vibe coding, where companies can kind of just pop up?
You would think it's a small company that just pops up, and if it is in our space, like I wouldn't say, oh, their product is not real, but I would probably say, well, they're not going to have, the enterprise security and capabilities that you need. But I actually saw a large competitor recently who is private equity backed and is a very legitimate company do a webinar showing a vibe coded solution and saying that they had built it in 2 months, when in fact, one of their customers let us know they'd been working on it for 3 years. So vibe coding, I think vibe coding is really, really valuable internally for sharing ideas and concepts and getting people on board, especially communicating an idea to engineer, even for PM to share ideas with designers. But like, we know what a lovable looks like. We know what a bolt looks like. We know what a Figma make looks like. They all look the same. So like, it's pretty easy to tell that something is not real. Like they all have the same design system.
Yeah.
So hopefully, I don't know. Vibe coding is fine if you want to sell a concept, but I don't think that I don't think if a company says we have this new product and it looks like the lovable that I made yesterday, that's a pretty good indicator to me that that product is not real.
So you wouldn't necessarily consider them competition, just
I think
noise.
I think they are competition, and it's important to guide customers along to let them know sort of where you are in the development process, like relative to that competitor that is overselling their product. I mean, that's another thing too, is like, I think sales teams can be really susceptible to what competition is saying and not necessarily look deeply into what that competitor is doing. And I think that's a lot of that's on product. So it's important for the product team to like do that research to help sales teams. So I think one of the responsibilities today is product and marketing teams should not expect sales to do their own enablement, should not expect sales to understand every product feature. Because guess what? They're not thinking about the product all the time. They're thinking about how to close a certain customer. They're strategizing on that particular like prospect's deal. They should be somewhat product experts, but like it's just not how they should spend all their time. So it is really part of our responsibility to explain exactly what that competitor is doing, especially if something like, I often see this feature bubbled up now, and now prospects are saying that they want that it's their top priority, and I'm like, that shouldn't be the top priority. Let me help you reframe the conversation. So it's partly reframing the conversation, partly like kind of reminding how you solve the problem, and also depositioning them to say like, why is this a top priority for you? And then the prospect will eventually realize that that it's not a priority. But yeah, just on that note, on sort of reintroducing competitors, I think that product teams do have more of a responsibility than we might realize to identify whether your strategic pivot is going to require a new sales motion. So in our case, like something that I probably could have done better reflecting on it is sort of calling out like there are going to be different personas in the sale. So we usually had one person, at least we'd had different personas, but it was one at a time. So it was either an IT person buying the solution or it was a facility person, but it was one person at a time. When you're selling a platform, the platform that we built, there are 2 to 3 different people that you have to kind of convince along the way. That's a completely different motion. So like I would definitely call out early, you're going to have these different people all in one sale. And here's what we need to relearn. Selling multiple products versus one product is also a completely different kind of selling motion. And then is there going to be a different technical implementation? I think that is the product team's responsibility to get ahead of and talk to sales about. I mean, you may want to talk about that before you probably want to talk about that before you set your product strategy. I think product strategy should be first. Most important is to have a product that people need. So I think product strategy would drive it. You wouldn't want to know that a product strategy is the right one and say, well, we can't do it because of these, A, B, and C kind of like sales boundaries today. But I think you have to look at the realities pretty early on, and it may change the strategy that you implement. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of that, like you set your strategy, you go to your sales team. How are you making that message stick? Like what activities, what strategies do you have to ensure that your internal teams are adopting your new product direction, your new product strategy, as well as introducing that concept to your customer? So it is definitely a two-part question. How are you getting that message internally? And then how is that message being produced, kind of promoted out externally?
So one, I think, is a lot of people will perceive changes as a pivot. Sometimes it is a pivot. Often it's not. Often it is an evolution of what you're already doing. So I think making it clear that something is not a pivot and here's why we're doing that expansion is pretty important. But I think something that resonates with every human being on earth is other people. So showing videos of customers and prospects that sort of align with your story is important. So one, like showing videos of people that are where your old story isn't resonating. For example, I showed a video recently that was like where the person said, you look like a lot of your competitors. I just can't tell the difference. Like they really wanted help. Like they needed help telling the difference. And my strategy behind that was like, we're going deeper on some of the things that we're good at. And so that helped to explain why like we're investing more in AI and we have to show right away, like how and why we're different. So showing like the bad, but also showing the good. So showing an example of a customer where your story is really resonating. So this is like those people that I talked about earlier where their job got a lot more complex. When someone is explaining like all the pains of their job, that usually helps to build credibility. Like showing people examples of other real people usually gets you pretty far. I think that's good. And then, sort of thinking about like whether that story is sticking and is working. Something I look for a lot is a mismatch. So it's important to look at the funnel, like once you kind of launch this message and where the biggest drop-offs are in the funnel. So what exactly did you change in your messaging? So try to deliver messaging changes in a way that they can be consistently measured or at least A/B tested to understand like if sort of the marketing to lead volume changes, it was because this particular message didn't resonate. I'm not a marketing expert. I'm sure this is harder and more complex than what I'm describing, but if there's a way to do that in an organized way, that's great. And then if we have a lot of leads come in and they don't convert to opportunities, clearly whatever we told them we do is not the story we're telling. I'm not saying it's not the product, but it's not the pitch. So is our marketing and the actual pitch the same? That will be reflected pretty well on whether it becomes an opportunity. And then from actual opportunity to sale, is probably a good indicator of whether your product is doing what you've talked about in those previous conversations. So yeah, I mean, I guess like the one thing that's made me more successful is getting more aligned with sales and marketing and like getting access to their data, because I used to think that sales data was like sort of a lagging indicator, but it's not. If you can get access to the calls, if you can get access to the pipeline data, that should be a pretty good indicator of whether your story is working or not. And then you got to figure out, is it breaking down in the market or is it breaking down internally where people are not saying the same thing as we're saying in our external messaging?
It definitely can't be like that silo where product is kind of isolated from it. Like the marketing leads and their titles and the volume and where they came through is such a like good indication of how you're getting people, what is resonating in the messaging and the strategy of the product. And then when you get on those sales calls, who we're talking to, what their concerns are, their problems, great indicators for product. So like that those kind of trifectas, and you throw support in there too, because you can't leave out support. But like those components just kind of show how much product development is a team sport. I think a lot of times product is kind of meant to be that, say, like leader, a little bit more of that coach in those amongst those different teams, because they're supposed to also represent the business as well as the user, and kind of have to be dangerous in each one of the components that you're talking with.
Yeah.
But I 100% agree. It just you need to have that access to information and to make good product decisions.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'd love to get to our rapid fire section of our podcast. So I'm going to just throw them at you, respond with what you got.
Okay.
You do have a little bit of time for like a quick story if you want to throw one in there, but I'm gonna hit them pretty quick. Okay. Yeah. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Favorite way to reset after a long week?
Stare at the wall. Do nothing. Nothing whatsoever.
That's good. I like that. I used to picture a nothing in my mind sometimes, just a blinking light of nothing. Weird thing, different thing. If you had to launch a product tomorrow, who would be the first person you'd call?
I would call my parents because they would bring me back down to earth and they would remind me that who cares about software? Like, don't have a panic attack. This is not a big deal. They'd be like, just go work at a corporation and have a safe job.
Yeah. Book, podcast, or show you'd recommend to any other product leader, so your colleague at a different company?
I would say that you should go subscribe to your competitors' websites. That is the media that, because I would say out of all the PMs that have been on my teams, I'd say like maybe 2 to 5% of them actually pay attention to competitors. It's really lacking. And me earlier in my career, I would say like, yeah, I don't pay attention to them because I thought all my competitors suck. They're not as smart or capable as us. And, if we look at what they're doing and we copy them, we're going to be inherently behind. And I think that's wrong. And I actually think there are some things you should copy from competitors because there's some things you have to build really innovatively, some that you just have to understand how it works. So that would be my media to consume. And then my other media to consume would be like anyone who talks about AI in a legitimate way that you can actually apply to your own job. I'm not going to say any like specific media or any specific podcasts, but because even some of the ones that have become popular this year are a little bit out there. It's like you're talking to the founder of,
every big company.
You're the founder of Replit. Like, that's great.
More companies in the world.
You're talking to the chief product officer of OpenAI. Like, yeah. I want to hear from them, but I don't think that's relevant to most like PM.
Applicable in many ways.
Yeah. So I want to learn from them, but that's not necessarily the one I'd say is how you should learn about AI. So think about that for yourself. It's surprising to me how few product managers like know what an AI eval is. So maybe Claire Vaux's podcast, I think, is like probably the most applicable. Still has some like higher level concepts there, but generally I think she brings on guests that have AI content that's applicable to regular people.
Agree. What's one product you can't live without?
A product that I can't live without is the United app. And the reason I say that is because I travel a lot and travel technology was really bad for a long time. And the United app is really delightful. Like if a flight is delayed, it notifies me right away. It gives you step-by-step directions through an airport. It's just correct and it loads quickly. Like when you're traveling, your app has to load really, really quickly because travel is something that like seconds can matter. So I would say that the United app is something I can't live without.
Do you have any worst or funniest travel stories you want to share?
My travel stories are mostly around bringing the wrong shoes. So one time there was 3 or 4 of us and we were early stage startup and we had gotten this incredible like Fortune 10 customer. And we were invited to their chateau an hour outside of Paris to help all of their executives understand how to launch OKRs to their company. What I didn't realize is that the whole chateau was gravel and I wanted to look really professional. So I had worn like some kind of heel and that was a total disaster. So I don't know how I got through it. I think I just, the rooms were level. So I think I just tried to I didn't go on the walks. I'd make an excuse. If they were like, let me show you around this amazing, let me show you the cheese cellar. I would have to avoid those situations. But here's another time where shoes are really important. I used to travel to Hyderabad a lot with Gainsight for most of our engineering and product organization and design organization was in Hyderabad, India. And you could get from the hotel to the office in 2 ways. One, you could get a cab. I would say that the office was like a quarter mile away from the hotel. Like it was a short distance. If you took a taxi, it would take you an hour because you had to go this back road and it was just tons of traffic, or you could walk. So I chose to walk, but when you walk on the highway. So you really have to have like not just a sturdy shoe, you have to have a shoe where you can run from like a car that's gonna possibly run into you or a bike or something. So you have to have actually serious athletic shoes. So be conscious of your shoes in the country that you're going to travel to.
Good advice. Good advice.
Thanks.
All right, last one. One word that best describes how you want your team to feel after a big launch.
Hopefully they feel nothing. If you feel nothing, that means like there weren't a lot of mistakes. So that would be like the top feeling. Because I think if you work on something for a year and then it launches, one, you can't really tell right away unless you're a consumer product, you can't really tell right away in a business product if it's going to be successful. So at least you want to know that things aren't broken. But then the second feeling, maybe the next day, is excitement. Like, oh, we started getting feedback, and it's not like P0 bugs. It's just it's feedback that's going to drive you to build something better, or a new idea comes across. That's how I would like ideally want it to go down. So I want them to not feel like something in the pit of their stomach, feel it more like feel nothing and then feel excited here in your heart.
All right, Ciara, it was great talking to you. I really appreciate you joining on the podcast. Thank you so much for the insights.
Thank you so much. It was an honor to be here.